All right, everybody, we are back. This is the Hood Rat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR, online at widerfm.org. Next thing we want to talk about, so you might have seen these going around Facebook, photos and memes about fast food workers or fast food restaurants not having enough staff to stay open. And you probably also argued with your reactionary Uncle Bob about how like people are too lazy to work and all that stuff. So we wanted to push back against that and talk about this issue and kind of dig a little bit deeper. I'm going to read a couple of excerpts from a Truth Out article, and then me and Lawrence going to discuss this in more depth. It's no worker shortage. Report finds low wages make food workers want to quit. This was published May 5th, written by Sharon Zhang. Following the passage of stimulus packages with aid for workers, like expanded unemployment benefits, politicians and business owners have wrung their hands over a supposed worker shortage as people refuse to return to work, as they say. A new report pushes back on that narrative and shows that actually it's more likely low wages offered by businesses that are causing workers to quit. So anecdotally, I think a lot of us have been reaching this very obvious conclusion, but important to note, there is some data that backs this up. The report by One Fair Wage finds that 53% of restaurant workers have considered leaving their jobs during the pandemic, and 76% of restaurant workers cite low wages and tips as the reason for leaving the industry. Being paid a low wage was the most common reason for leaving by far. COVID-19 concerns were the next highest reason, with 55% of workers saying they were concerned about pandemic safety. The survey of over 2,800 food service workers also found that overwhelmingly, a full, stable living wage would compel workers to stay at their jobs. 78%. That's 78% of responders said as such. This was the top reason for workers to stay by nearly 30 percentage points. The next top reason at 49% was if they received paid sick leave. As we all know, the pandemic has made conditions for restaurant workers worse. The survey finds the vast majority of workers, 87%, said tips have decreased during the pandemic, and 80% of respondents said they have witnessed customers being hostile towards their coworkers over COVID-19 guidelines. Conditions have been particularly tough for women, especially women of color and mothers. Working mothers face a double whammy, often bearing most of the responsibility, taking care of children, while making low wages. A report from One Fair Wage from March found that women are not only more likely to tip less, but are also more likely to face harassment on the job. Along with the pandemic, relying on tips has created, in some cases, hostile conditions for female tip workers. Wednesday's report shows that low pay across the industry could be responsible for nearly 40% of restaurant companies are having trouble finding workers. And there's more that goes in that article, and we will link to it in the comments. But that basically that paints out all of the data that I really wanted to touch on. I think for most of us, most of my working class listeners, this stuff is very obvious. Even so much as like I think we all know people who like if McDonald's or there's a large amount of food service industry workers who listen to the show in our community. Downtown Kalamazoo is a huge hiring sector. And we all know wages have been very low for a very long time. And while the cost of living in Kalamazoo is fairly low compared to much of the rest of the country, those costs of living are going up. And when faced with a decision whether to accept unemployment aid of $600 a week versus going back to work, where you could be making substantially less than that, I think it's fair for workers to say no. If we're going to go back into the workplace, and especially in the food service sector where you've got all of these vectors of contagion for COVID, then yes, you deserve to be paid a fair and decent living wage. Even some of us in the healthcare sector, I've been able to tap into like some hazard pay from the state government and get some of those resources. But for a lot of these employers around the country wringing this hand, blaming workers for being too lazy to go back to work, what this survey finds is like, no, these people would be fully willing to go back and do that work, which, by the way, especially fast food work, it can be very grueling, difficult work. You basically combining some of the most difficult aspects of manufacturing jobs with customer service. And but they'd be
Facts.
willing to come back and do that difficult work if they were paid correctly and paid a living wage that could actually support them and their families. And obviously, this is a struggle that's been going on for some time. Fight for 15 has been, going strong for nearly a decade. But I think the combination of the pandemic and the fact that Americans are actually seeing something akin to like a social safety net from the recent COVID relief bill, that people are perking up and saying, no, we deserve more. There's actually this great, this kind of somewhat related, this has gone viral. A Dollar General or a Family Dollar store had basically the employees closed up shop and basically said, we are going on a general strike. We deserve a living wage. And then also had like another sign that says like capitalism destroys everything it touches and stuff. So like people are becoming more aware that we deserve better, and all it's good. Workers, you deserve better wages before going back to that line of work. And if you're gonna come onto the page or something and try to talk about lazy workers, this is some empirical data that says, nah, we're willing to do the work, but we need to get paid enough to live.
I'm absolutely 100% facts. And also, let me remind everyone that there are multiple states, including red states, that chose to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Those states did not shut down. They did not become Republican version hellholes, the hellholes that Republicans fearmonger about, that the industry fearmongered about. No, there were multiple states that said, "Nah, we are going to have the minimum wage be $15 an hour." It's still not a living wage, but it's much more livable than what it is now. Um, and also McDonald's CEOs and has said to their board members, if we go up to $15 an hour, our profit margin will still be the same. It's not going to hurt us.
Yeah, there's
So
studies that show between like basically employee retention is much higher when your employees are paid better. So that means you don't have to go through the process of retraining new employees, which is expensive in its own right. And again, quality of life in the community improves. Working people have more spending money, so it's kind of like it raises all ships. When more working people have more spending money, they go out and spend that money in all the local businesses and restaurants and eateries, and everybody just does better. And there's
I'm
studies show that.
it goes back. It goes to the what you said, right? It goes to the thing. Rising tide lifts all boats. We're forgetting the fact that some people ain't got they ain't got boats, they ain't got floaties, they ain't got shoes. But if they had a living
Sometimes they got to
wage,
pay for
they
their own
could.
non-slip shoes, actually.
Right, and I had to pay for my own non-slip shoes when I was working at I'm not gonna say where I was working at, but
Yeah.
I was working at in a few places. Shout out to Panera Bread. Um, but it makes it when you actually give your employees a living wage, then you're more likely going to they're going more likely going to stay for the grueling work that you're putting them that they're going to be put through. Um, and yeah, a lot of you millennials now are saying, you know what, instead of going back to the mines, which is basically what they want Americans to do, they're like, no, we're gonna do something else. We're gonna start streaming. We're gonna start our own business. We're gonna this side hustle that I was doing to make money. I'm gonna actually make that my full-time gig now. You know, uh, and a lot more Americans are doing that now because they don't want to feel like they're just a cog in a machine. And as we've seen, that machine will continue to run with or without you.
Yep, no, that's absolutely true. And again, you don't have to look very far for models of where this works. Basically any Eastern, any like Western European country, the Nordic countries, even most places in the global South, the fast food jobs and stuff pay their workers a living wage, and it works, and for all the reasons we just described. And I think it was inevitable that we were going to come to a point where you could have, American labor asserting itself and demanding better pay, and kind of this perfect storm of the pandemic, which is really, you know, we spent like most of the year praising grocery store workers and fast food workers and healthcare workers as heroes, and praise to essential workers. It was time to give those people essential pay. That's
Facts. Doug. Even plays like I don't even like Chick-fil-A like that. Chick-fil-A pays their workers close to $15 an hour, or I can't say that in Kalamazoo. I think they pay them like $14 to $15 an hour. Chick-fil-A doesn't like the LGBT community, but they'll at least pay their workers $15 an hour. like, like, come on, y'all.
All right. So